Most empires in history conquered land. They took cities, they installed rulers, they collected taxes. The Mongols did something different. They didn't just want your land. They wanted to make sure that anyone who ever lived there, anyone who ever built anything, written anything, believed anything, simply ceased to exist. This is not a story about conquest. It's a story about erasure, and it is one of the darkest chapters in all of human history. In the early 1200s, the Mongols were nomadic tribes scattered across the steppes of Central Asia. No cities, no writing system, no standing army in the traditional sense. Then a man named Temujin united them. You know him as Genghis Khan. Within a single generation, this man built the largest land empire in human history, stretching from the Pacific Ocean in the east to the edges of Central Europe in the west. How? Not through diplomacy, not through economics, through a military machine so brutally efficient that it rewrote the rules of warfare entirely. The Mongol army moved faster than anyone thought possible. They could ride for days without stopping, sleeping on horseback. They had no supply lines, they lived off the land. And they had one tactic above all others that made them uniquely terrifying. Surrender immediately and you live. Resist, even for a day, and everyone dies. Every man, woman, child, and animal inside your walls. Every building, every field, every trace that your city ever existed. Let's talk about scale, because the numbers are almost impossible to process. Historians estimate that the Mongol conquests were responsible for somewhere between 40 and 60 million deaths. In a world with a fraction of today's population, that represented roughly 10% of every human being alive at the time. Let that sink in. 1 in 10 people on the entire planet killed. In Persia alone, the total population may have dropped from around 2.5 million to just 250,000. That's a 90% reduction. Not from war, from systematic extermination. In China, before the Mongol invasion, the population was estimated at around 120 million people. After the conquest was complete, a census recorded just 60 million, half the population of an entire civilization, gone in a matter of decades. In the city of Nishapur, one of the great intellectual centers of the medieval Islamic world, historical accounts describe over 1 million people killed in a single assault. The Mongols reportedly piled skulls into pyramids afterward. Men in one pile, women in another, children in a third. These weren't accidents of war, they were policy. Here's what made the Mongols different from every other conquering force in history. They understood something that most armies didn't, that fear is more powerful than any weapon. Before arriving at a city, Mongol commanders would send the message, simple, direct, and completely clear. Surrender now, and your lives will be spared. Resist, and nothing will remain. And to make sure people took the message seriously, they made examples. When a city resisted and fell, the Mongols didn't just kill the defenders, they killed everyone. Then they destroyed every building. Then they salted the fields so nothing could grow. Then they broke the irrigation systems so the land itself became uninhabitable. Cities that had existed for centuries, thriving centers of trade, culture, and knowledge, were reduced to empty plains within days. And then word would travel to the next city, and the next. And most of the time, the next city surrendered without a fight. It was terrorism as military strategy, and it worked with horrifying efficiency. Of all the cities the Mongols destroyed, one stands apart, not just because of the death toll, but because of what was lost forever. Baghdad, 1258. At the time, Baghdad was arguably the most advanced city on earth, the capital of the Abbasid Caliphate, a center of science, mathematics, medicine, philosophy, and astronomy. The city had hospitals, universities, and libraries that the rest of the world wouldn't match for centuries. At its heart was the House of Wisdom, a vast library and research institution that had spent 500 years collecting the accumulated knowledge of every civilization it could reach. Greek philosophy, Persian science, Indian mathematics, original scholarship from the greatest minds of the medieval world. In January 1258, Hulagu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, arrived with an army of 150,000 soldiers. The caliph refused to surrender. What followed lasted just 2 weeks. When it was over, between 200,000 and 1 million people were dead. Every mosque, hospital, and palace in the city had been burned or torn down. The caliph himself was executed, wrapped in a carpet and trampled by horses so that no royal blood would touch the ground. And the House of Wisdom, 5 centuries of human knowledge, was destroyed. Eyewitnesses described books being thrown into the Tigris River in such quantities that the water ran black with ink. Soldiers reportedly walked across the river on the backs of floating manuscripts. The Islamic Golden Age ended in 2 weeks. Centuries of scientific and philosophical progress erased. We will never know what was lost in those waters. Here is the part that is almost more haunting than the destruction itself. The Mongols didn't destroy everything randomly. They made choices about what to keep and what to erase. Skilled craftsmen were spared. Engineers, architects, doctors. People with practical value were taken as slaves and transported across the empire to serve Mongol purposes. In some cities, the Mongols would execute every resident and then specifically import a new population to rebuild and farm the land. Entire cultures were not just killed, they were replaced. The Shisha people of Central Asia, a civilization with their own writing system, their own religion, their own centuries of history, were so completely destroyed by the Mongols that historians consider them genuinely erased. Not conquered, not absorbed, gone. After Genghis Khan died during their campaign, the Mongols reportedly intensified their attacks out of grief and rage. The destruction became even more total. There is a quote from a historian who described the Mongols as a natural disaster on the order of an asteroid collision. That is not an exaggeration. We think of history as a story of progress, civilizations rising, learning, building on what came before. And for most of human history, that's roughly true. The Mongols represent something different, a moment when the thread was cut, when centuries of accumulated knowledge, culture, and human life were simply ended. Not because of disease or famine or the slow decay of time, but because one man unified a group of nomadic horsemen and pointed them outward. Genghis Khan is still celebrated as a national hero in Mongolia. His face is on their currency. There are statues of him across the country. And in the ruins of cities that no longer exist, in the empty plains where Baghdad's libraries once stood, there is no monument to what was lost. That is perhaps the most Mongol thing of all. When they erased something, they erased it completely.